Right, you might remember earlier this year, a Liberal Senator from South Australia, Senator Alex Antic, in Senate estimates, asked a very simple question of the Secretary for the Department of Health, Professor Brendan Murphy.
Can someone please provide me with a definition of what a woman is? Department of Health. Definition of a man, definition of a woman. Anyone?
It's pretty basic.
It's basic stuff. Professor Murphy.
I think there are a variety of definitions, and I think
just a simple
perhaps to give a more fulsome answer, we should take that on notice.
You're going to take on notice the question of what a woman is.
No, well, there are a variety. It's a very contested space.
When you take something on notice, it means they go away and they work up a response. Well, we've got the response. It's 74 words or so. It landed out there today. Let's have a look. Framework is adopted to define a person's gender include chromosomal makeup. I think that's pretty straightforward. Gender assigned at birth, the gender with which the person identifies, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it is just extraordinary that that's the sort of response we get from our top bureaucrat there in the Health Department. Common sense is not always common, but my panel have got it in spades. From Sydney, Executive Director of the Menzies Research Centre, Nick Cater, and a Friday regular of ours, Sky News commentator Prue MacSween. Both of you, I can't say ladies and gentlemen anymore, Nick and Prue, welcome. Well, I can say it and I will say it. Prue, if a whole bunch of swimming officials can define a woman as they have, and they've now said women's swimming events are for biological women, why does Professor Murphy have to contort himself and give us such a non-answer to something that should be fundamentally based on the science?
Well, sadly, he's a victim of, the public service, the woke infiltration of these people who have lost any sanity from what I can see. I mean, speaking as a woman who may have got too close to a peroxide bottle a bit, and it may have addled my brain, but frankly, I couldn't even understand that definition. For God's sake, when are we going to find some common sense from people? If they cannot define what a woman or a man is, we are in serious trouble. And the thought that these people are in charge of our health system, it's hugely worrying. I mean, they haven't got a brain between them.
Nick, there was a whole issue too earlier in the year. The word maternity was being stripped out of women's guidelines in the Health Department, and it was released, and I raised it with Greg Hunt and said, for God's sake, you're not going to put up with this. And he said, I didn't see it, and he said, I'll make sure it gets changed back. I mean, a lot of this stuff never goes to ministers. It was changed back. We know in Queensland today they're stripping women and terms like maternity leave out of the industrial relations framework and legislation up there. I mean, you think this stuff doesn't matter. Sometimes you get exhausted fighting the fight, but it does matter, and it's absolutely fundamental.
Well, it does. And look, I feel for Brendan Murphy. I mean, we don't pay him to fight these battles for us. These are things that should be decided by politicians on the basis of community expectations, and community expectations both on things like maternity and on the definition of what a woman is are pretty simple. And I think that the problem here is that, if you can't define a woman in 3 words, then you're in trouble. But, in the end, I think he went with what is probably the consensus deep down there in the bowels of the Department of Health, is that you can either be a woman by birth or you can identify as one, basically. That's not what that doesn't pass the pub test, as they say. But it is, unfortunately, I think, now built into many of the regulations and laws in Australia that is, unfortunately, where we've got to. And I think it would take some courage, but I think I'd like to see politicians take this on and turn this back.